God, this story has so many awful layers to it, honestly. I think first of all, it's just devastating. The carcinogens, toxins that have been released into the air, the water, killing animals, making people sick. We're seeing reports of it going over into Canada.
It's in the river,
It's in the
obviously.
river that goes to many other states.
And the food sources coming out of Ohio are all going to be impacted
Yep.
by this that we all eat, all of us.
Yeah. So again, as with every story, it's got all this intersectionality. It's got like the horrific reminder of the fact that this is what the railroad workers were striking to try to prevent, that the way their hours have been cut and the number of employees have been cut forces people to work in dangerous conditions. The fact that the CEOs have reinvested the money that they make with stock buybacks instead of investing it in, keeping up with their equipment, and the fact that Biden and Democrats and Republicans, of course, broke a strike and sent all these people back to work, even though it took them years to amass the support and go through the proper channels to file to strike. And then to see people coming in to protect Pete and to see, it's like, it's got everything that's a horror show.
Well, you left out a few. The
Okay,
fact that Joe Biden hasn't mentioned it once, the fact that the media isn't covering it at all, the fact that until maybe yesterday, if you asked anyone you knew who wasn't really into politics, they had no idea what you're talking about. And most of them still won't even know when you bring up the railway.
Yep. And then I've seen some liberals like, well, that's right-wing Ohio. Maybe you should vote better, which is like,
oh my God,
so repulsive. Yeah, it's kind of got all of it. Should we just start from the beginning?
I think we should show the Sirota video just to explain the situation. No, and it gives you some details you may not already know if you are following the story too.
Great. We just saw in the middle of the country a giant chemical fireball, 100-foot flames, and very few people asking questions about what led up to this. So there was a derailment in 2012 in New Jersey,
releasing 20,000 gallons of dangerous chemicals and noxious gas into the air.
There's children in the town that are being affected by this.
And there was pressure on regulators to do something about those kinds of trains. And so the Obama administration had a rule proposed to better regulate these trains. The National Transportation Safety Board told the regulatory agency, said, listen, these regulations should broadly cover not just oil, they should cover what's known as Class 2 chemicals. And the chemical industry lobbyists went to work pressuring the regulatory agency to limit the definition of what a high hazard flammable train is. Limit it in a way that the train in Ohio, that kind of train ended up not being classified as a high hazard flammable train.
The NTSB closely monitoring 4 cars that are filled with vinyl chloride. It has been found to be linked to cancer.
Trains that were subject to this rule were going to be required to use a special kind of new braking system to try to deter or at least reduce the damage from derailments.
ECP delivers the unmatched performance of air brakes with the precision of electronic communications.
Most trains in the country are still using technology from the Civil War era. But the moment the government was considering making it a mandate, the railroad industry's changed its tune. It cited cost concerns to pressure against that rule.
We want to see federal regulations when they're necessary, not just in reaction to a headline in the Washington Post.
Obama's rule included that measure to expand the larger use of those brakes on the nation's rail system. But in that 2016 election year, the Republican Party got about $6 million from the rail industry. And Senate Republicans started beating the drum for Trump to repeal the rule. Donald Trump repealed the brake rule so that the industry does not have to even start to use these kinds of brakes. One former Federal Railroad Administration regulator told us that these brakes, which are known as ECP brakes, would have mitigated a disaster like this. And we just learned today, after the publication of our story, federal officials told us that this train did not have those brakes on the train.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so many liberals, Democrats have jumped in to blame Trump, which fine. Yes. I mean, that is what Republicans always do. They deregulate and they starve government of agency to show government doesn't work and to, give their donors more money. But the truth is, that's what Democrats do too, because newsflash, we've had a new president for 2 years. Like, what the hell? And he just shut down a strike where the workers were complaining about this very thing, warning about
very
it.
thing. And Pete has already said he had no intention of rolling back these regulations and reinstating them. So he went, the first statement out of his mouth was that he wasn't going to reinstate the regulations.
Yeah, he said there will be more derailments. Yeah, he's been particularly awful. I'm trying to look about all these different things. There's been, well, first of all, I'm not.
Let's just talk about.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's talk about that they're worth 55. How many?
That's billion.
Million. What
That's
is
billion.
that? It's billion. $55 billion offered $25,000 donation,
which comes to $5 for each resident. $25,000. And by the way, you could give each resident $1 million. And it doesn't matter because a generation of kids, of people are going to be born with, more cancer, or going to get more cancer. They're going to have birth defects. I mean, the way the US talks about Chernobyl and the Russian response and how it was something that was uniquely Russian and evil, and here we are. I mean, by the way, like, we already poisoning our water in Flint, in Jackson. Neither one of those has been fixed. I think there was another boil advisory in one of those two places just recently, but it's never truly been fixed. So it's all talk. They don't do anything. And when you actually try to speak the truth about it and talk about how completely corrupt and inept they've been, all you get is pushback from party line cheerleaders.
Well, why on earth are our train lines still for-profit businesses? Like, every other country has figured out, you need to privatize, you need to have public ownership. Nationalize the railways. I mean, we even Amtrak, which goes all across the US, it's a capitalist venture. It's a for-profit venture.
Yep.
And I mean, like, for example, I was taking class in San Francisco, and I would take the local train to BART, which is the Bay Area Rapid Transit, which is the subway essentially, to get to school, which cost me, $75 round trip. Yep. So that's not cost saving. It's convenient for me, but like, you're not even encouraging people to take public transit from the capital to the biggest city nearby, San Francisco. Yeah. You can't do that one way. You have to do all this jumping around stuff.
Yeah.
And the railways, even for Amtrak, they're owned privately. So even Amtrak, pedestrians, whatever, this is the blue drink talking already.
Patrons, customers.
Amtrak has to pull over and wait once in a while because a train will come through, and the business comes before the customers on the train. So you can't rely on how long it'll take you to get somewhere, because you could be pulled over for half an hour going to San Francisco from here.
Yep.
It's 2 hours away.
Yeah. And of course, Pete's big push is for electric vehicles, which most people can't afford, but also does not actually help. What we need is nationalizing mass transit and really investing in our infrastructure. I mean, you look at what China's done over the past decade with their high-speed rail. We have nothing like that in this whole country. But by the way, and I can't find it right now because that blue thing hits hard. That trash can hit you over the top of the head. I'm trying to find in our slides here, but I get there's upwards of 1,000 rail derailments, railroad derailments, train derailments every year. They don't all carry, carcinogens in them, but also I'm not really totally sure why they could not have sequestered the wreckage, why they had to set it on fire to make sure that all of those toxins spread. I don't even understand what that cleanup was. And of course, at this point, they're investigating themselves, which we all know how that works. Yeah. This is more than Ohio. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm across the Lake Erie in southern Ontario, Canada, by Niagara Falls. And me and my family my family and I have had nonstop headaches for about 7 days straight now. We can literally smell the chlorine over here in Canada. This is bigger than they're telling us. Yeah. And they're saying it's safe to go back. That's what they're saying now. It's safe to go back. I mean, it's like Obama drinking the water in Flint all over again. I mean, it's just disgusting. And, I think, listen, we saw that happen. It was jaw dropping. We see what they've done with COVID, what they're doing with climate disaster, I don't think anybody trusts our government anymore. But people, even if you don't trust them and you know that it's not safe, people don't necessarily have the ability just to pick up and leave their homes. I mean, like that, I think the minimum in that area of East Palestine is $44,000 a year. That's not enough to just be able to like pick up, leave your work for a few weeks and go rent a hotel room.
No, it's an absolute tragedy. And to me, the biggest revelation, I guess, from this is really how corporate owned our media is. Like to ignore this of all issues, probably one of the biggest ecological disasters of my lifetime. Next to maybe, I don't even know next to, but the oil spills back in the 80s.
Yeah. Well,
are close,
yeah.
but I
and
mean,
even I think early like BP oil spill, yeah.
But those were covered like crazy. It was nonstop. But now we've got this.
Do you know who was president when that BP oil? I mean, sorry, but I think that's what it is. Yeah, it was George W. And they covered it all the time. Just like when COVID first started, it was the death ticker at the bottom. And as soon as Biden came into power, they took it away. Yeah, I mean, really what's happening is they're circling the wagon and protecting Biden and Pete. And then here's a reporter, Evan Lambert, for News Nation, who went down there to cover a press conference, and the police arrested them. And so that's what happens. I mean, what we're seeing all over, we saw it in Cop City. Here, those are police that are being hired by Norfolk Southern. So those police are there specifically to protect CEOs and capital. That's all that's all police are really doing anyway. But yeah.
Right. He was just at a press conference from the governor, DeWine, is it? Or something like that?
Yeah. Ohio, DeWine, yeah.
And he wasn't allowed to ask a question. He was escorted out. And there's video of them, not having
pushing
any real
him onto the ground.
to arrest him.
No. Yeah.
It's pretty clear.
But
which,
yeah,
so
instead
of the media covering this stuff, we get the exact opposite. We get journalists arrested. That's how far the media is
journalists arrested who are trying to cover it. Yeah. And then other journalists insisting that, yes, we are covering it. And what did you want Pete to do? It was a Trump regulation. Like, we haven't had a Democrat in power since 2021. So there's been a whole bunch of people. We've got, the Krasenstein brothers. The fact that Republicans are relentlessly attacking the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, over a random train derailment in Ohio tells me only one thing. They fear Mayor Pete's political future. He'll be president one day, and Republicans know it. I mean, imagine 10 days after seeing the explosion of toxic fumes, that's your take, is that Pete's going to be he's a great candidate for president.
Yeah. And there was another criticism that got a lot of, a tweet that got a lot of traction, and it was attacked as being homophobic because they called Pete a little guy or something,
No, wait, I have it somewhere.
But anything could be homophobic, but they use the same identity politics, weaponized nonsense.
Of course.
Like, why would you criticize the transportation secretary over transportation? I mean, do you hear yourself, Krasenstein?
Yeah. On the heels of all the Southwest stuff and the airline stuff over the summer, the supply chain issues, we still don't have baby formula. He's done absolutely nothing. And even just recently, his big thing, this was on, what was this on? February 13th. So again, 10 days later, Pete Buttigieg makes no mention of the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, while fielding questions at the National Association of Counties this morning. It couldn't be a more exciting time for transportation. I mean, that's sick. That's like Trump level sick.
Why wasn't he asked about this by the press as well? And I mean, if he was, it was not covered, but you know, he should be asked. The press needs to pressure these guys. If the press doesn't do their job, the public has no chance of making the right decision about any of this stuff because they don't know about any of this stuff.
Yep. And they're being told that it's safe to go back. It doesn't matter that their water smells bad, that they're having headaches, that they're seeing dead fish just like on the side of the riverbanks. So they're, you know, people are seeing all this and they're being told, I wish I could read that. The reverberation of this will be incalculable for the people in 3 different states that will have to live with the consequences of chronic exposure to these chemicals. An entire region of the country will become one gargantuan cancer cluster. Contamination will live in the soil for a generation. Birth defects will start to appear in a year. Water for hundreds of thousands from the Ohio River will be potentially contaminated. But what really makes me beyond livid is that we all know not a soul will be held fully accountable, except the reporter who was arrested. Norfolk Southern will be forced to pay a fine that will equate to about 6 hours of their total yearly operating costs. A few people will lose their jobs. Nobody will do prison time because nobody broke any laws. There will be a cleanup effort, but it'll be a meaningless platitude. Norfolk Southern will say they will make changes. Changes might be forced to pass incremental reform. Congress might be forced to pass incremental reform, but that's all that will happen. And that's what makes me see red. And that is 100% accurate.
Yeah, we have no power in this situation. We have none. The press isn't helping us. The progressives in Congress. I mean, okay, I'll give Bowman. Bowman said something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So kudos to him. But I mean, if you're not calling out the current administration on this, you can't just vaguely call for policies to change. And you need to say it's up to Joe Biden to do something about this. It's up to Pete Buttigieg to do something about this and pressure them.
Fine them out of existence, nationalize them. And I mean, that is what that has been proposed by many rail workers. They want it nationalized, you know.
It's just like all the fires in California with PG&E and SMUD. I mean, they both need to be nationalized. Anyone that looks at these organizations says, you know, if they aren't biased, says they're running themselves for profit and killing people for profit.
Yep.
Essentially by not taking basic precautions so they can make a few more bucks. And there's no reason we can't nationalize these. This is, and when we on the left fight for socialist policies, I don't see it happening overnight. I see, you know, maybe you can force the issues like, hey, we can get the trains nationalized, or hey, we can get universal health care, or, you know, one of these policies. But the people that are supposed to represent us, the progressives, the squad, need to be using all these issues that should be in front and center in everyone's mindset right now, and leveraging everything you can to push for socialist policies. And when they're not doing that, they're not an ally. I'm sorry. They're just not.
I mean, 100%. And Mary writes that Jamal Bowman took lots of money from the rail industry. I didn't know that, but I do think that he voted to break the strike, and he was part of that band of people who pretended that it was the workers who came to them to ask about putting the 7 days of paid sick leave in a separate bill, which when it was sort of like, I think it was Jordan who did a really good piece on it, like wheeling it back. And it was actually not that the workers came to the squad or Jamal Bowman. It was that they proposed this. Listen, we're going to vote to send y'all back to work, even though you want to strike. But let's do this as a separate bill in a way to save
never
face.
happen.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. So it absolutely. And I see Kim
Which
just
makes
wrote that
all of them strike breakers.
100. They're all scabs. And
scabs.
it's on all of them. This is on all of them. Yeah. And I mean, what a travesty, because of all this, all the lies about masks. Nobody's gonna, you know, if only they were wearing masks. It's like one thing after another. Yeah.
Celebrating this.
Unbelievable. New Palestine disaster, filling the Ohio River with dangerous chemicals, poisoning the water of Yokel Central. What a lovely thing to say. Gee, that's too bad. Perhaps they'll reevaluate their voting patterns a bit. They won't. Meanwhile, these trains run across the whole country. If you think it's only going to happen, I mean, just 3 more happened in the last couple days in different states.
And even this is where all the faulty logic and shitty look, even if you think Republicans are all pure evil, should die. The state has at least a third of them are Democrats. I mean, so even on that basic, stupid premise, you're an idiot. I mean,
and it's probably, honestly, it's probably more than that. But even like, so, and what about the kids? You know, it's like like calling it the pandemic of the unvaccinated at the time when and nobody under 12 could even get vaccinated. It's like, well, and you all can just fuck off and die. I mean, the way this country has just decided, or so many, and you know, I don't think it's most people. I don't think it's most people on the ground. I really don't. I think it's these people who probably a lot of them are paid by the DNC to write stupid, awful tweets like that. But anybody who's coming to Pete's defense, I mean, I got a lot of like, you know, deal with it. Bernie lost to Pete in Iowa, which first of all, not true. Sorry. But also, what does that have to do with anything? Like, he's Secretary of Transportation right now. What is he doing? Not his job.
Yeah, but what could he do? He inherited this from Trump, and and he inherited it from Trump, and now it's 2 years in, we don't have Congress, so we can't change anything now. It's not. There's literally nothing he can do now, unless you
Trump
vote harder.
Was all powerful.
Vote harder in 2024 if you want trains to be safe.
I mean, yeah, and abortion and COVID. I mean, I don't even know what they've got to run on anymore. It's crazy. I don't understand also why Republicans are allowed to do whatever they want when they have the presidency and Democrats are completely powerless. When Democrats are in power, it's the Green Lantern theory, and you can't just force people to do what you want. And when Republicans are in power, they have all the power in the world and they can do everything you want. So much so that then when Democrats have the exact same power or more, they can accomplish nothing. It's beautiful. What a system.
Well, I mean, it's because Democrats are rational, so they'll vote on some legislation for Republicans. This is bullshit. I'm just telling you the argument. But when Republicans are irrational, so the Democrats thought that we'd have some rational Republicans, but it turns out they're all irrational. So
the good Republicans.
We need to, and a couple Democrats are villains from, you know, obviously Manchin and Sinema
and Bernie, like the left. That's what they're, you know, Bernie is bad. They would way rather embrace the fascist right than have any socialist. I mean, again, like just last week, the bipartisan vote about the horrors of socialism. You wouldn't want to nationalize the trains. That'd be awful. We love our capitalism. I mean, it's like, I have to think that the narrative is falling apart for people, but I don't know.
Well, I think that's why this story is so hidden, because it hits a lot of notes. It hits the Biden and the train and the strike, Biden train strike, Pete specifically, because they know that Pete's anointed. They know he is next in line and possibly in line in 24.
I mean, I
think we need to
spin the wheel.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, it's okay. It was a really good point, but I'll say.
Was it?
We have some good videos on the train wreck, but I think we don't need to show them, right?
No, let's show the video. I just want to mention that the blue drink is not bad after you drink half.
It's growing on you.
The second half is quite enjoyable.
Is it? I think it's the TikTok one, right?
Sure.
Rail workers warned us about disaster like this. I heard firsthand months ago about the corporate practice of precision scheduled railroading.
Precision scheduled railroading is shorter staff, longer hours, longer trains, less safety, less maintenance. Do I have all that right?
Oh, you got it all right. I mean, a lot of the derailments that you're seeing on national TV is one of a few things. It's lack of maintenance on the track, or they've cut the track gangs too short and they can't get out to fix it, or they've cut the carmans, which is the union that works on the rail cars. So we have one derailment here in Northeast Ohio where a wheel flange was very thin. It picked a switch and derailed the entire train. Luckily, it was full of candle wax and not something highly volatile.
Rail workers tried to strike over this stuff, but were stopped by Congress. A few weeks later, and here we are. Several Norfolk Southern cars of toxic, highly volatile chemicals exploded fantastically in the tiny town of East Palestine, Ohio, 20 miles from where I grew up. So I met Clyde in East Palestine to ask him about it.
It looks like a faulty bearing caused a catastrophic derailment. These railroads are turning profits hand over fist. They've cut their workforce to bare bones. and now they're paying the price for it because the wheels are falling off the train, basically. Carmen were inspecting cars about 3 minutes per car. That's always been the industry standard. Now it's 90 seconds per car.
Is that because of PSR?
Yes, it's a rush job right now, and these guys are under pressure. I mean, they're working men and women, and, you know, if they don't hurry up and get this car done, they're going to be fired.
Great points. So I went to a press conference with Norfolk Southern and Ohio Governor Mike DeWine to ask them about this.
What could Precision Scheduled Railroad have to do with the axle failure that caused the derailment?
I have no idea that it's a mechanical issue. Precision Scheduled Railroading is a management process.
Not a great answer, and that's probably because Norfolk Southern let a worker take the fall, rather than a single corporate executive showing up in the town that they polluted to be held accountable. You see, Wall Street owns Norfolk Southern. 74% of shares are owned by a who's who of infamous hedge funds, and this is the business model that they demand. Profit at any cost. And disaster like this is simply a cost of doing business. They cut everything, make all the money, and pay off disasters in tiny flyover towns from the profit. But instead of answering for any of that, they're betting that the corporate media, under the same pressure for extreme profit as railroads, will only ask questions about how much cancer people will get and not why this preventable disaster happened.
Yeah, it turns out they're not even asking questions about the cancer.
Yeah. Oh,
They're not
God.
even, they're pretending this doesn't exist.
Yeah. It's pretty devastating. Let's spin the wheel.
Compartmentalize things. Let's do this. Let's have a shot.
Yeah, baby.